Welcome to NTR Radio. I'm Tom Forster Nubis.
I'm K Odds.
I'm VZ Mark II.
And we have a captive audience now.
Do we?
No. Well, they can't really say they're at work or at school or anything else, you know. Corona-chan has made sure of that.
Yeah. It's also made sure Anime Boston got canceled.
Yeah.
Which made me upset. Which made me very upset. But the silver lining is I finally got a new keyboard.
See, I thought you were going to say the silver lining is that you don't have to deal with the stinky Smash people.
Well, yeah, I stay away from them. But...
Well, it doesn't matter if you stay away from them. The smell finds you.
You get the wafting, but...
Are Smash people really that bad? Because I never encountered any.
Yes. Like, there's a reason that's a saying.
Yeah, it actually is a problem.
Yeah, there's some sort of weird, like, does not bathe, does not understand the concept of soap going on there. I'm not sure what it is. You feel bad for people that don't have that problem, you know, because everybody else ruins it for them. Anyway, we should probably tell people to get involved with the chat.
So here's what you do. What you do is you go to ntrradio.net, click on the live chat link. That'll bring you to the page where you put in your nickname and hit the button to join us in the ## SLC Media channel. Alternatively, take your favorite IRC client, point it at irc.ryzen.org, and join us in the # SLC Media channel. In addition, you can get at us on Twitter, at TANubis, at VZMK2, at immortal_KGods, at NTR Radio, and as always, the email address to get involved with the show is ntrradio@gmail.com.
To get in contact with your local CDC now.
Yeah. But yeah, so
we know you're quarantined.
I have finally replaced the 13-year-old keyboard I've been using with something that was, manufactured in the past few years.
Okay. So,
which is I usually.
So it's not an antique.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, I usually wait until something has basically become unusable to replace it.
Yeah, it's one of those like, there's a term for that when you have something you do it at the absolute last moment, pretty much.
Yeah, it's because it's like because the old keyboard still works. Just I think the insert and delete keys aren't functional.
That would probably be a problem.
It's a problem sometimes, but it's something I could work around. But now I have something that was modern. Is that it actually cost me less money than the old keyboard cost me when I bought it.
Huh, interesting. I mean, my keyboard it's in my laptop, it's starting to show a little bit of age, but I don't think it's like none of it's unusable. It's just some keys are a little bit more sticky than others.
Right.
Again, insert jokes here.
My old keyboard outlasted the company that manufactured it.
That's interesting. You know what else is interesting is our podcast has outlived most other anime podcasts.
There have been anime podcasts that have come and gone in the span of NTR Radio running.
Yeah.
What keeps us going?
NTR. No.
Yeah, that's the power source.
That's the power of love, baby. That's wrong on many levels. Anyway, I have something to point out because it's kind of a big deal and it's medically relevant. Okay. So over the last week, I have been recovering from surgery. I am currently under the influence of oxycodone. No. It has very little effect on me other than dulling the pain. Anyway, the point is, to make a long story short, I had a wisdom tooth that was actually somewhat going inverted.
Oh.
To where it was actually stabbing me in the face.
Oh.
And I could not shut my mouth all the way because of it. you can see where this would be painful.
Your teeth have betrayed you.
Yeah, it's like some sort of fucking like you ever, it's not like you watch Star Wars and you see the Sarlacc pit and you think, hey, that could be me. Like, your face, like, fuck, No, but anyway, so I went and had it looked at, and they said they were going to have to, use an oral surgeon to remove it. Just simply from the fact that, regular dentistry, we're going to have to use the real shit, have to use the hardcore stuff. And so I went and I had it x-rayed and everything, and they basically said, well, we're going to have to knock you out. That's probably standard procedure with most of these anyway.
So Mike Tyson rolls up.
That caught me off guard, man. that was great.
You watch a really, really, really absolutely boring anime.
So 8 episodes of Flowers of Evil later, you're fully asleep.
No, okay, so here's what they actually did, though. I was wondering how they were going to do it, if they were going to use the gas or, they have different methods, but they actually ended up giving me an IV. So it's like sort of a slow, an IV drip, like, okay. And then before I knew it, I'm like just sitting there kind of mumbling. And then like the next moment I woke up, I have gauze in my mouth and my pants are off for some reason. Nah, I'm kidding.
Was Bill Cosby also standing? And
you see, you're getting your teeth removed and quaaludes and no.
And the NTR and the podcasting. We are awful people. We are just like,
Hang on, I got a drop in for that.
Just look at those three stooges. Have they no shame?
No.
That drop in doesn't get enough love.
No, it does not. Thank you, Tiffany Grant. Anyway, so that's put me out of commission for the last week, because afterwards I have not been able to eat hardly solid foods, which has been fun. So basically stuff that infants eat, like applesauce and shit like that.
And now I was going to say, now I'm reminded of that one episode of Married with Children when Al went to the dentist and he came back.
Yeah, that's a fantastic one too. Which, as an aside, one of the hilarious things about that is like Marcy is really into that in ways that are very sexual. Because she's like getting all hot and bothered by the thought of the instruments being in her mouth and shit.
And then he just says, now it's time to spit.
Anyway. Anyway, the kind of that's been my last week. So needless to say, I haven't been doing a whole lot. Taking painkillers, trying to eat what I can. And, it's not as bad as it was. I'm already starting to be able to eat more stuff and whatnot, but those first day or two afterwards really sucked.
How many teeth was it? Just one?
It was a wisdom tooth.
No.
But the thing was it was sort of like, I'm not even sure what the technical term for this is. Ask a dentist, I guess, or orthodontist.
Was it not an impact, is it?
It might be. I'm not sure, but it sort of was like, I don't know how to explain it. It was going into where it was pointing at my cheek and digging into my face.
Eee.
Yeah, and because of it, I could not close my mouth all the way. Because of its location, it's like right there, way the fuck far back there, and it's jagged and everything. It was a pain in the ass. So it had to be done. It was one of those things where, well, I could just sit here and be in agony, or I could go and have it taken out. Choice is pretty simple, really. Again, fun stuff. And it's not the first time I've ever had to have any kind of like weird dental work done or anything like that. It is the first time I think I've ever been knocked out, though, that I can remember, for any kind of procedure. Again, it didn't take very long. It was an hour. But again, somewhat disorientating. You get up, and then the worst thing is actually not even the pain; it's the nausea. Because there's this like leering kind of nausea afterwards that just kind of, I don't know if that affected anybody else that had this procedure, but that seems to actually be the worst of it for me, is that feeling like, oh, I feel like I'm gonna barf. Which means clearly I have corona.
Of course.
No, obviously.
So I actually watched some anime.
So I better go out there and buy like a wheelbarrow full of fucking Purell and toilet paper. Fucking idiots. Seriously, there was a dipshit out there that like bought a fuck ton of it and was basically doing the price gouging deal.
Oh.
And the funniest thing was like the people from Gab was defending that. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's not immoral, but pornography is. Like, denying people basic necessities so you could swoop it all up and sell it back to them at like ridiculous prices isn't immoral. But yeah. Like, what are they? Some sort of weird fucking like bastard spawn of libertarianism and just being a douchebag?
I don't know. You don't want to know my opinion on that whole thing because that's gonna be an entire rant.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't see where that's coming from. Like, how does that work? Anyway, whatever. You actually had something interesting to say, so.
Yeah, so I actually did watch some anime. I am 100% fully caught up on Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, if come December 2020 this anime is completely forgotten, I'm disappointed in everyone. Because not only is this just really good, it's saying some actual important stuff that I wouldn't be surprised if not everyone is fully understanding, but is definitely disappointed if not everyone's fully understanding it. So like the basic premise is these three girls start up it's supposedly the film club, but they're just making anime.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, it's basically a long form commentary on the Japanese animation industry.
That's what I heard about.
And like,
so that means some people aren't getting it.
well, of course. And I think what's really smart about this show is that it doesn't do the expected thing of portraying the money people as basically evil.
Oh yeah, so basically like Mr. Burns.
Well, like, so one of the three main characters, Kanamori, has no artistic talent, but she's the person running all the business aspects. So she's out there making sure the money's on point. She's making the deals with people to get funding and whatnot, and she's keeping the other two on track.
Okay.
And they do a really good job of not only humanizing her, but making it clear that she has a point and she's not just being an asshole.
I like where these dojins are going to be going.
So it's a very smart show, and basically everyone should watch it.
See, I'm just kind of, I don't know, ambivalent or whatnot, because like the people that endorsing it of the show, or the people who like, you know, would turn around and say, you know, the stuff that we are all into.
I guarantee you those people are the people I'm talking about who aren't fully getting what the show is saying.
Yeah, okay.
That's number one. Number two, wait 3 months and see if these people are still talking about Eizouken.
You know what? I'm probably gonna I'll check it out, but I'll wait until it's done. I'm kind of, I think that's what, not just me, but a lot of people are sort of like, we pick like one or two shows we're watching as it's coming out in the season, but then everything else is just a wait and see. I think other people are kind of doing that. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That makes sense purely from a consumption standpoint. Because, like, okay, are you really going to watch 8 anime per season as they come out? Does anyone have time for that?
Because the only things I'm watching this season are, Heya Camp, which is the short for Laid Back Camp. The live action Laid Back Camp, which is still my favorite thing this season.
Okay, as an aside, it almost sounded like you said labor camp.
Labor Camp.
Is that a new Crunchyroll project?
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, I'm not even watching it as it comes out. I watched like 6 episodes of this today.
What's the other one? And Koichiro Asteroid, which I'm liking. And I also picked. I actually picked up again. The short show. Natsunagu, the one about the girl who goes back to the town of Kumamoto that had the earthquake, trying to find a friend. I actually like that one too. It looks very Kyoani-ish, like the character designs. I also watching the new Sentai, the Super Sentai of this year, Kimmer Ranger. Which basically Kara is basically like means sparkle, so sparkly ranger. I'm liking it. I mean, again, I don't really watch modern Sentai. All my taste is usually the 80s and 90s era of that stuff. Just in tokusatsu in general is the 80s and 90s. Tends to be the stuff, but you know what? For modern stuff, it's all right. I could keep with it, or at least for now. I really like that Green Ranger. You see me on my timeline post her.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one that's a track star. The Red Ranger is pretty much me. Is pretty much me in high school, because he's like this artist, and the girls just trying to talk to him, and he's just like so into his art, where he's like just completely ignoring everyone and everything around him, including a monster outside destroying this. It's like nobody's just sitting there drawing.
You'd think I'd actually been watching stuff this last week since I've been kind of incapacitated to a degree, but actually I haven't. I've been not really in the mood.
All right, that's understandable.
Again, it's kind of hard to enjoy it when you're sitting there kind of like, okay, throbbing pain. It's like trying to enjoy something when you got a headache. I mean, yeah, you technically can, but I don't know.
Well, if that's all, I do have some news.
I'm okay.
Once I find the drop-in, is it L or N? It's L. Let's news.
Let's news.
Working to restore power.
Okay, so the problems with Funimation are well documented. It's been said before on this very podcast that they're fucking the bag up for the entire Western anime industry.
Before we get into this, shouldn't this be actually something in the next segment?
No, because this is something specific to Funimation.
Okay.
So, we got them out here changing around anime dubs. We got them out here with the multiple problems with their marketing that we've,
I would say this is considerably more egregious.
and I would say if you didn't think things could get worse for Funimation from a PR standpoint, this from Bounding into Comics, March 12, 2020.
Guess who would be wrong?
Credits show Funimation allegedly continued working with former One Piece voice actor Scott Freeman despite 2014 child pornography arrest.
Yeah. This was published March 12th, by the way.
This is March 12th, just a few days ago. And
by a person named Spencer Bakuli.
yes. And
sorry if I mispronounced their surname.
To be clear, this is the same publishing house that was real quick to dissociate from Vic Mignogna after the ANN hippies. Now,
yeah.
Once again, this has been said on this podcast in the past. If Vic is guilty of what people are saying he's guilty of, yes, he needs to be gotten the fuck up out of here. But by that same token, why is Funimation continuing work with someone who was arrested for this kind of unsavory material? The article goes as follows. According to voice acting credits on certain Funimation titles, the anime production studio continued working with former high school DxD voice actor Scott Freeman after he was arrested for and charged with possession of child pornography. After recent attention is brought to a video showing various anime voice actors attending a very friendly Okratron 5000 holiday party, fans noticed that one of the voice actors it sounds like a convention for
it sounds like for okra. Like,
yeah, it sounds like you're out here buying herbs at the convention. Fans noticed that one of the voice actors in attendance was Freeman, who would be charged only months later with 8 counts of possession of CP by April 5th, 2014.
8 counts, holy shit.
8 counts. Following his arrest, Freeman's ongoing roles were quickly recast, including his roles as Issei Hyodo in High School DxD, Big Slow in Fairy Tail, and Yasop in One Piece. However, it appears that despite his arrest, Freeman's career in anime was far from over. According to IMDb and Anime News Network credits, Freeman continued to be cast in Funimation productions, albeit in significantly smaller roles, well into 2015. And it goes on to detail some of the roles he's credited as playing. Freeman did not appear in any of his roles following his September 2015 conviction, which saw the disgraced voice actor sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. So, what is going on at Funimation?
Wait a minute. We should also mention he's actually since been released from prison.
Yeah.
As of 2019, and now resides in Papillion, Nebraska, as a registered sex offender.
Naturally, but that's sort of beyond the point. What the fuck is going on at Funimation?
Yeah, that's a little odd to say the least.
That's more than a little odd. We're past the point of a double standard at this point.
Well, we
got here. What it's looking like to me is Funimation's fine with working with some of the most. I'm having trouble coming up with an appropriate word, but some of the most unsavory people you can probably imagine, if it flies under the radar. So which means as soon as ANN, coming right on off of the heels of discovering that they enabled a habitual sexual offender, put out a piece on the multiple allegations against Vic Mignogna, and that blows up. Funimation's real quick to do an internal investigation and dissociate from Vic Mignogna. But after one of their people gets arrested on so arguably worse than a lot of the stuff Vic is accused of,
Credited as doing.
they continue casting him in. They certainly took him off the prominent roles, but they continue working with him at all.
Actually, I have a point of reference to this. According to a statement from Funimation provided to Anime News Network in 2015, the company claims they were not aware of his legal trouble until May of 2015, over a year after his initial charging, to where it actually has a quote here. I guess this is what they said. In May of 2015, Funimation became aware of the legal matter involving Scott Freeman, at which time we suspended our relationship with Scott. In the wake of recent news, we have permanently ended the relationship. Any other questions should be directed to Scott directly, unquote. Here's why this doesn't hold water for me. They already were taking him off of big roles.
Yeah.
So this is PR bullshit. It has to be.
Who out here still trusts Funimation?
Why would you take away a main character like Issei from High School DxD if you didn't know he was in trouble and he'd already been doing it for a while, and then stick him in small roles? Come on, they had to have known.
Exactly. And like, who still trusts Funimation anymore? At all, on anything.
I trust him about as much as the dude who says he's got a bridge to sell you.
As far as I've seen, for the vast majority of cases, anyone who knows even half of the stuff going on with Funimation does not trust them anymore at all.
I should also point out that if you read it in the comments here, there's people saying that this isn't the whole story. This is being spun or whatever. So, I mean, if somebody wants to point us in some information that we're leaving out here, feel free to do so.
I mean, if they can say that it's being spun, and that's fine, but do they know how it's being spun? This actually gets me into my second Let's News, and I didn't initially plan on going into this, but this is something that needs to be mentioned. We had Sentai Filmworks get into a small bit of hot water.
Oh yeah, again, some of this stuff sort of plays into the main topic we're going to discuss, but
sort of.
We're going to do it here just for sake of the news, I guess.
Yes. So this is once again bounding into comics, and I understand that there are some people who portray bounding into comics as having a spin. The problem is you
can look at the arrest records.
Well, that's one thing, but I'm talking specifically about this. This is what I'm talking about here. Well, this is what I'm talking about here. Sentai Filmworks changes dialogue to explicitly reference misogyny in dub of To Love Ru anime. This from March 6th, 2020. And so I realize there are people out there that portray bounding into comics as having a spin, but my question is this: name me one news source that's talking about this stuff that isn't also vilified as having a spin on it.
The closest you could really find is usually pot shots being taken by Senkaku Complex.
Yeah, and
that's
also a publication that people accuse of having a spin.
Which it does, but it doesn't pretend it doesn't. So, I mean, there you go. I mean, I don't think anybody looks at Senkaku and doesn't know what they're getting into.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of those things where it's like, it's just like sort of the reputation precedes it in a way. Anyway, to continue on then.
So basically, in long story short with this is Sentai Filmworks is working on the dub of Toloveru, and evidently someone got an early copy of it, and in one scene, forget which episode this is, but in one scene you've got Mikan you got Homeboy and he's talking about how he's not going to date anyone who doesn't know how to cook. And
yeah,
if you look at the Japanese, Mikan's response is, "What? That's so old-fashioned." And if you take the English dub, her response is, "That's misogynistic."
which for those of you out there with dictionaries and encyclopedias, these are not really things you normally conflate with each other. One of which is generally, or we should just say that that's not really a synonym. I don't know why they would choose to do that if they weren't making some sort of political point.
Here's my thing. I'm going to be lenient about this particular instance. Not that they shouldn't fix this particular line, because they should. But looking at the response, looking at the reputation and the history that Sentai Filmworks has with regard to this kind of thing, I don't think they have the same malicious agenda as Funimation does. Now,
No,
however, there is a weird paradigm that I want to talk about here, and this going out in the IRC. This is from the Twitter of the ADR person who actually wrote that line. And the explanation goes as follows. I wanted to put this out there because I know folks are mad at me, and honestly I hate making people mad. But there's some difficulties in dubbing you may not be aware of that can affect choices, such as syllable count, animation mouth flaps, and rhythm. Ideally, we keep it as close to the original translation as we can, but dubs just aren't that simple, and they have to flow and work with the animation. For you purists out there, subs are definitely for you, and I can personally like both depending on the show. My job as an ADR writer is to make sure things sound natural and avoid sounding too stiff. There's no one-to-one trade when it comes to translation. It involves a lot of puzzle solving and spending tons of time with the material. I put a lot of love in my work. I promise no hidden agendas. And I believe the promise of no hidden agendas. That might come to bite me in the ass later, but I believe the promise of no hidden agendas in this particular instance. What I do think is happening is that there's some personal conceptualization going on where the ADR writer sees Homeboy saying, "I'm not going to date someone who can't cook," and conceptualizes that as misogynistic. Not, and then writes that in not as a hidden agenda, but just as the connection they make unconsciously in their own mind. I can see that. But what I really want to point out, looking at this string of tweets, is how come every time we have something like one of these dub script changes, the explanation is always, well, dubbing isn't that easy. It's not just a one-to-one translation. We gotta consider the syllable count and the mouth flaps and whatnot. But they can never explain how how exactly that applies in whatever situation people are complaining about.
Mhm.
Because that makes sense, right? Like, so, okay, you're in the industry. You did this line. Just explain why. Tell us why. Don't just say, oh, well, dubbing is hard, and you probably aren't aware of all the problems. That doesn't help anyone. That doesn't help anyone understand. All that really does is it's patronizing. It's saying, oh, I know you're upset, but just understand, it's just really hard, and there's some.
I'm sorry, I can't hear that.
Well, it's really hard, and
I knew you were gonna do that.
We need to take into account the syllable count and the mouth flaps that nobody ever cared about. Has anyone ever cared about the dub matching the mouth flaps?
No.
Has a single person on the planet ever cared about that?
The only
Japan
people
doesn't care about mouth flaps in there.
The only people I could ever see caring about that would be like hardcore Miyazaki people.
Right.
Maybe.
We need to take into account the mouth flaps, and you just don't understand that it's not 1-to-1. We understand that it's not 1-to-1, and you have to take into account stuff. People just want an explanation about why that specific decision was made.
Mm-hmm.
And what's hilarious is we know more about why those decisions were made on Funimation's part than we know in this instance. And this instance is the one that I most believe is non-malicious. Because we know Funimation's motivation, because when people went and got at the people who wrote those lines in Prison School and in Maid Dragon and Hajime to no Gal, those people clapped back.
Yeah, to the point where they were basically going like, a bunch of losers like this crappy show.
Yeah, exactly. So we know why they did that, but we don't know why this happened in Sentai Filmworks' case, and it's disappointing because all you need to do is explain the reasoning, explain the decision-making process, explain why that decision was made the way it was. But we get this mealy-mouthed kind of skirting around the explanation, and in the meantime, it's highly patronizing to concerned people who are just trying to figure out why this line was changed. And it's especially not necessarily egregious, but it's especially a problem given how people's eyes have been on the anime dubbing industry for years at this point.
Isn't Mikan the one that likes doing housework, like in this figure I'm posting?
I wouldn't quite know. I have never watched To Love Ru. That is her, but I don't quite know if that's her, if that's her character personality.
I don't really remember that from what I saw. It's been a long time since I've seen it, so I honestly don't remember. And when I saw it, of course, was quite some time ago.
And then the second question I have is, what the fuck is up with people defending these changes?
Yeah, it's very strange to me that it's just a little bit of censorship, just a little bit, like it's some sort of.
It's just a little airborne. It's still good. It's still good.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, oh, you just got a little bit of cancer, just a little. I mean,
you got a little bit of corona. I know that.
Everybody's got a little bit now.
Yeah. Well, it's like, what is the motivation?
Anime.
Like, what is the motivation? What is the like? Why?
I know what you're getting at. Yeah.
It's like, why are people coming out to defend these companies when number one, the problem is they're the core of the problem is they're making a product that I don't want to. I'm not interested in. Don't want to consume.
I got a better. How come I was the only one that was like back in around 2013 or so? I was the only one that pointed out that issue with and this was sub only for Hatsukoi Limited.
Because you were the only person watching that show, and because
it was one show.
It was one show, and it wasn't political. Like I can take a pretty good guess at why they changed that. I don't necessarily support it, but I can take a pretty good guess. Again, my problem is they're creating a product that I fundamentally don't want to buy. And what's worse is because of the way licensing works and because of all that kind of stuff, nobody's going to create a product I want to buy with regard to these particular works. There isn't a version of Maid Dragon that I want to buy. I would like to own Maid Dragon, but I'm not going to own it with Western ADR staffs shitting all over it.
As presented by Jamie Markey.
Yeah, I'm not gonna own. I don't want to own Jamie Markey's Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. I want to own Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, but we got this. We went into this paradigm where, okay, now we're letting dubbing staff run buck wild, and if you don't like that, then you can just not buy it, which is fine. But don't then bitch at me for not buying it, and don't then bitch at me for complaining that you're preventing me from buying this product because you're making a product in a way that I don't want to buy it. And I feel like the support the anime industry discourse that kind of reared its ugly head in the past couple weeks was a direct result of the conversation surrounding the Sentai Filmworks thing.
I've got a perfect example of this on a micro level that pretty much explains all of it. It's kind of like if you were really interested in getting a pure version of Pokemon, you're fucked. And unless you import it, you are fucked.
Well, I got one better for you. That's directly tied to the anime industry. I would like to watch a dubbed version of Gakkou no Kaidan that isn't just Stephen Foster and the gang turning it into a huge joke. I want to watch dubbed ghost stories and actually get the actual story.
Yeah, you're fucked.
Can't fucking do that.
But I picked something that was a little bit more universal because it's big. More people probably know what Pokemon is, I would assume.
Certainly, but
come on.
This is what's happening on a smaller scale in the anime industry.
Absolutely.
We're creating versions of the product that people fundamentally don't want to buy. Fundamentally,
And the thing is there's certain groups of people and certain sectors, if you want, that kind of want to browbeat you into doing it, even knowing you have a problem with it.
Yeah, and they'll use whatever
all kinds of weird guilt,
whatever
games,
guilt trippy explanation they can find, which all ultimately turn out to be wrong, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, we gotta support the creators because the creators deserve to be paid for their work regardless. Number one, yes, it's true the creators deserve to be paid for their work regardless, and they were paid. Congratulations, the creators got paid. You actually didn't even need to do shit about it. That's number one. Number two,
I think it's people
buying Western disc releases is going back to the creators. How much
think
do
it's
you, how
more
much
about-
do you know about how much do you know about the anime industry if that's your paradigm?
Not very much.
We're supporting Funimation. We're supporting that's like Appendix A. Get the fuck rid of this language of support Crunchyroll, support Funimation. This isn't a fucking charity. These aren't 501c3s. If Crunchyroll gets their act together and makes a service that I want to subscribe to, I'll subscribe to that service. I'm subscribed to High Dive because I like their service. They have a good library. They have a good web player. They have a whole bunch of anime that I want to watch, and it's convenient.
They don't have a PR person that fucking is buzzing around being a little dipshit.
Well, even beyond that, the fucking Crunchyroll web player hasn't worked. They're constantly in hot water. They also don't pay their translators very well, but they also don't pay their translators very well while purchasing a swanky ass office. But that's beside the point. But it's
they have dubious connections and nepotism, which we're gonna get into later.
I subscribe to Faku because they put out good stuff. Their service is easy to use. I'll buy their stuff. It's high quality. They've made products I want to buy. Sentai Filmworks makes products I want to buy. Discotheque Media makes products I want to buy. Nozomi and Right Stuff make products I want to buy. Funimation, I can't trust them to make products I want to buy. In fact, on some level, I can trust them to make products I don't want to buy because they've reveled in doing that. So I get rid of this language of support these Western publishers. But going back to point
if they
2,
deserve it.
At that point, you're not supporting them.
No.
At that point, you're participating in a market. You say, hey, these motherfuckers made some shit.
I'm fine with their bullshit.
Well, it's like, hey, these motherfuckers made some shit that I want, and now I'm gonna buy. Now I'm gonna buy for them.
Case basis, but that's just me.
You're on a case by case basis, and that's cool in the gang. But what bothers me is a lot of the rhetoric surrounding Western publishers is
I don't care about supporting at this point. It has nothing to do with being.
I think his point is that it's highly deceptive.
It's deceptive. It's
don't you want to be a good otaku?
Don't you want to be a good citizen? Don't you want to make sure
those poor hard-working animators get paid?
Those poor hard-working animators. You've heard about how underpaid they are. You've heard about how bad the working conditions are.
This sounds like one of those commercials.
It's like they went over to fucking. It's like they went over to Africa, and they're filming the starving, emaciated animators. Fucking
for just 50 cents a day.
For just 50 cents, you can support this hard-working animator, and you see him.
You can get Kenji his new wheels.
Yeah, skin and bones, hunched over his drawing board. No, it's not what you're doing by
That's great.
by supporting Crunchyroll, by buying from Crunchyroll and Funimation. That's not what you're doing. That's not how licensing works.
No.
I will say that if we're talking about the anime industry at scale, in large part, then yes, you are putting money into that. But number one, it's going into the production committee business model that a lot of people are real soured on because they found out that the production committee exists and that they're supposedly responsible for the studios having no money and for the animators getting paid so little. which isn't true, but they're still in the paradigm of if you walk into a room and one guy has $5 and another guy has $2, they assume that the guy with $5 robbed the guy with $2. So this,
You know what? I'm sure. And I wanted to say, I'm sure it was the same exact way before the production committee, as far as like the conditions of the animators being paid what they are.
well, here's the thing. Before the production committee business, like right before the production committee business model, nobody had any fucking money to make any anime.
Well, it was sponsored by toy companies. That's another thing you gotta.
Well, I'm talking about like when they came up with that model. Like the reason they came up with that model is, hey, we like just us couple of companies can't take that risk of shelling out however many $100,000 to make this anime. What are we gonna do? In comes a whole bunch of companies to distribute the risk and invest in this show so it can get made in the first place. So
it's a very.
I don't.
If you really,
A lot of people think we need to reform the production committee business model, and I don't think people really want that to happen. I don't think people are going to be satisfied with the outcome if that's what we do.
All right, one more question, and then before we'll sort of end this part, because I heard this argument before. I won't say who, but I'm sure you know who I mean. You can follow the breadcrumb trails. Would unionizing the animators work, especially in Japan?
Depends on what we mean by work. What is our end game?
The animators getting paid for their art.
If we're fine with a lot of animators losing their jobs, then yes, it would work. This is the same response that I would give maybe they should make less anime people.
Right.
If you're okay with a non-trivial amount of those animators losing their jobs, then yes, we should make it less anime. If you're okay with a non-trivial amount of animators losing their jobs, then perhaps they should unionize. That, and you're also creating a new infrastructure there where, okay, so now the union exists. Now we need funds to maintain the union. So if we're gonna pay the animators more, but some of that money is gonna go to maintain that union structure. So there's a bureaucracy there.
Which that's usually taken care of, if I had to guess, in the form of dues.
It's taken care of in the form of dues, but generally speaking, it's just the whole thing, the whole infrastructure gets more expensive to run, and plus you also have it doesn't
get less expensive.
It certainly doesn't get less expensive, and you also have the paradigm of, okay, now you have to be part of the union to even be an animator, and that's gonna play into that structure, and that's the union's probably gonna make some kind of money off of that. Just to have it's here's the thing about this entire structure that people talk about. There are second and third order effects that you need to consider very thoroughly before you speak on any particular solution. That's why my go-to is always that the studios need to find other ways to make money. Like if it's not an acceptable outcome that a lot of animators lose their jobs over this, then it really comes down to the studios, doesn't it? Because they're the last line of defense here. Because if you look at the business model, at any point in time, the studios and the animators aren't getting stolen from. They got paid. They agreed to an amount. They signed a contract, and they were paid for their work. Regardless of whether any of us think it's enough, they negotiated a contract. They were paid for their work. What really happens is we can't just start mandating that production committees give studios more money. Why would they do that? The studios were agreeing to these contracts.
Mm-hmm.
If the studios were to make an industry alliance and say, listen, none of us are gonna work for this amount of money. We're all going to collectively demand higher budgets for these anime. They can do that. On some level, it's going to be similar to a union. And then on some level, what happens if you have a newly established animation studio and they come in and say, yeah, we'll work for that much. We'll work for less than all these other studios are charging you.
So
They're going to get a
juicy
whole
stuff.
bunch of work. They're going to get a whole bunch of new work, and the studios that decided to get together and bargain for more money are going to lose out on that idea, because studio comes in, hey, we'll do the same for less. No downside.
Right.
Which is
And
why the solution, as far as I see it, is number one, studios need to make money independently, and number two, more studios, and this plays into this comes after number one, is more studios need to get to a level where they're sitting on their own production committees, and that has been happening.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there were some that were just fortunate enough to almost be in that position early on.
Well, it's like previously it was basically just Sunrise, who was already close to Bandai, and KyoAni, which is just exceptional.
Yeah, I mean, they're sort of the go-to example of that idea.
I'm gonna see
And
if I
it's
can.
also the
find...
reason they don't have to basically be contracted out to all these adaptations they don't want to do. I mean, really.
Well, on some level, it's why they don't have to do that, but on another level, it just means purely they're able to profit from the success of the anime they made, and that's huge.
They're able to choose even what they want to work. That's the, which I guarantee you a lot of your lower end ones do not have that luxury.
Well,
you're basically
even beyond that, I think being able to profit from the success of the show that's critical, and nobody's talking about that.
We should also point out that, relatively speaking, KyoAni does not what's the word I'm looking for? They don't necessarily need to rely on supplementary things like merch as much as some others do.
No.
They actually can get by on the product itself, which is
that's why
rare.
Here's KyoAni. Here's the
single sound euphonium figure.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the virtuous cycle of Kyoto Animation. Kyoto Animation starts out, and they make a couple anime that are hits, and they get recognition off of that, and that gives them more work. As they make more hits, they eventually start sitting on the production committees, and they still haven't stopped making hits. So they're investing in these shows that explode. Like every KyoAni doesn't make flops. They're allergic to making flops. Every KyoAni show explodes, and they're invested in all of these anime. So if these anime sell, KyoAni reaps the benefits. Your average studio that's not sitting on the production committee, they're just doing work for hire. It doesn't really actually matter. I think JC Staff has started sitting on some production committees. I'm not 100% on that.
Okay, then that's relatively recent.
Okay, so I'm looking at this is the list of companies funding anime for the summer season of 2019, and right here up top, a certain scientific accelerator, JC Staff is on the production committee for that. So if a certain scientific accelerator blows up, and it being in the Index Railgun franchise, highly popular franchise, they're bound to make some money off of that. And JC Staff is going to make some money off of that because they're invested in the show. They're entitled to a cut of that show's success because they put money up front. They have skin in the game. And what a lot of people don't want to hear this. A lot of people don't want to understand this. But when a studio just does work for hire, they don't have skin in the game. They were paid for their work. There's certain to be some artistic skin in the game, absolutely, but that doesn't mean they're entitled to a cut of that show's success because they didn't put any money up.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is people don't seem to realize that the people who fork over the money to get these things made want a return on that.
They deserve a return on it if it's successful.
Right, obviously. And the reason the production committee model works so well is because if it doesn't, it's not a complete crash.
Yes, exactly. It
the
distributes
risk is mediated through channels to where if it doesn't match projections, it doesn't cripple the company.
So Astra Lost in Space has 6 companies on its production committee, which means if that show fucks up, then none of these companies is destroyed by the cost it made to produce that show. All the companies lose a little bit, but it's not nearly as much as it would be if, say, just Studio Lerche decided to make that show themselves.
I wonder if Doga Kobo sits on their production like now. They've been making a lot of shows now.
I'll give you an example of something that.
Here we go. How heavy are the dumbbells you lift? Karakawa, Shogakukan, ATX, Doga Kobo, NTT Purara Ray, and Karakawa Media House. So Doga Kobo sitting on production committees. The idea of studios sitting on production committees is on the rise quickly. I'm seeing a lot more anime studios sitting on their own production committees than we did in the past.
Mm-hmm. A good example of something being disastrous that I can remember in my lifetime, though, was Square Enix. Well, that's what they are now. They didn't used to be Square Enix,
Previously
and that's my
Square
point.
Soft and
the reason why they completely went down the shitter is because they made this thing, you might have heard of it, called The Spirits Within.
Yep.
And they put a fuck ton of their money into it, and it bombed.
It fucking destroyed their company.
This is why that model happens, because what happens when somebody puts all their eggs in their basket like that and it totally bombs, what we're talking about, they had to merge with Enix to save their company.
Yeah.
Full stop. If they didn't, they would be dead.
Yeah, exactly.
That literally nearly destroyed them. And it's sad because it's like, I mean, no, I don't think it was a great movie or anything like that. It's just that they took a risk and it bit them in the ass.
Exactly.
And that happens sometimes. But if you can make it to where it doesn't, to where you can shrug it off, which obviously you can if you put so many eggs in your basket like that.
Well, you can if you're given $1 and this next guy's given $1 and the other guy's given $5, so he's entitled to a larger percentage of the return. But in return, none of you are destroyed if that thing doesn't take off. That's number one. Number two, anime as a business model is just purely designed in a way so that the vast majority of anime will eventually make a profit. 70%, only 30% of anime fail to make a profit.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another thing that
but it works on the long game.
it's a very long game. So this is one thing that
It's a very Japanese model, really.
it's
I
a
mean, in
Japanese
many
model
ways.
that and some Americans don't understand. It's like, remember back in the day, I was in, this is before I understood this. So the guy's extra wrong, but Zach was battling me on the idea of something being created cynically.
Oh, right.
And it's like,
Which makes no sense given the fact that people don't make money in the short term.
yeah,
like
exactly. If you look at the way the business model works, sure, everyone wants to make a hit that sells a lot in a short order, but the nature of the business
Realistically.
model is that most stuff will make a return eventually, and realistically, that's the other
And
part
really
of what makes the production committee business model really effective for making anime is
that. Sure.
these companies that get involved with the production committees know that they're eventually going to make a return. Chances are.
Mm-hmm. Not
Well,
only
he's
that,
coming. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna be real here. He never struck me as somebody who actually understands how business models work to begin with.
Right. That. But I was gonna
Uh,
say, like, he's coming from a they're just making this because they
To
would
make
like
money?
to make
Oh, you mean like anime?
they have to make off of otaku buy things regardlessly. It's
Yes.
like
That's
Yes.
that's
That's
the answer to that is
capitalism.
yes. Well, here's the thing: are you gonna make media for people who buy things, or are you gonna make
We're
media
gonna
for
make
people who
media
don't
for
buy
people
things?
who sniff their own farts. I mean, and don't buy anything. If you want to make money, hey, you want group 1. I mean, group 2 might, be high hoity-toity and, legend in their own mind or whatever, but they're not forking over the money. And without money, this whole industry just goes kaput.
Listen, I understand that there are a lot of very talented, highly visionary people out here in the anime industry that if you set them loose will make the most outstanding, most greatest works you can imagine. Understand that's a reality of the anime industry. But another reality of the anime industry is none of those people are going to get the chance to do that unless someone creates something that sells.
It's just the way it works.
say that someone like that. Well, see, I wanted to make this high art thing, but I was forced to make Arrow Manga Sensei because we didn't make money, and that's probably what they're coming at it.
Find me someone in the anime industry who said that.
Oh, it's that one stupid picture that one guy passed and it got all passed around. You know which one?
Well, it's like the one where
a single dude.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the dude who was saying, "Oh, well, we can't make what we want to make. We have to make this cute girl anime." Isn't the one like they're not the one that's in the trenches doing the drawing.
Yeah,
The guy who's in the trenches doing the drawing
it's easy
is,
for
hey,
him to say that shit.
I like cute girls. I like to draw cute girls. Here's this cute girl I drew.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but that's one of those people that sort of how to word this nicely.
Number 2, do we even know that that's what was said in whatever the source from that is?
Yeah, that's another thing.
'Cause
I've only seen the
I don't
picture.
know-
I've not seen any video.
I've not seen the video. I don't know what the video is. I don't know what the source is. So do we know
I mean,
if
for
that's
all
what
I know,
that
it's
was
the
actually
anime
said?
was a mistake thing. You know, like
Yeah, exactly.
it could be something like that. You know.
It was a mistake.
Anyway, I think we're gonna take a break
Yeah,
now because
so
we've got a
the-
little tizzy here.
Talking about the production committees actually brings us into a perfect segue to our next segment. So
We're
we
going
will
to dovetail.
kick
if-
into
and-
that.
And if you thought some of these other stories were infuriating from Funimation and stuff, settle in.
So keep it right here. This is NTR Radio. Welcome back to NTR Radio.
Yes. Now you can all sort of nestle in.
So we were talking about production committees before the break.
Mhm.
And one thing that's important to understand about production committees in the modern day is we're having some involvement of Western companies sitting in production committees now. I have an article here. This is coming from Funimation's own blog. Title: What does it mean to be on an anime production committee? And if we scroll down to the last heading, how does this work with international partners like Funimation? And goes as follows. Funimation is listed on production committees for 3 titles during the winter 2020 season. Hatena Illusion, ID Invaded, and Plunderer. They've also been on the production committee for titles like Fruits Basket, Fire Force, and Dimension W. Due to the work they've done and strong relationships the company's built with Japanese partners in licensing shows for them, they were invited to participate on these committees to help fund these productions directly. Instead of simply licensing rights fit to a finished show as companies usually do, Funimation is now able to take part ownership of some titles directly when bringing them to the rest of the world. There's no fear about losing rights of these shows either. They're here to stay in the Funimation library in perpetuity. Conversely, Funimation is trusted by the rest of the committee to use their international expertise to better market the show to foreign viewers and provide more detailed input to the other Japanese companies regarding what fans abroad would like to see. It's a win-win. For fans, this kind of access means the ability for international partners to collaborate with creators on things like key visuals, preview videos, and exclusive behind-the-scenes content. And it goes on. Anime is no longer focused solely on the Japanese market in the next paragraph. Japanese companies are looking to foreign fans' interest in titles more than ever before to increase the financial return on their investment, as well as allow them to reinvest that money into new productions of even higher quality anime. This means that subscriptions to Funimation and service and purchases of home video releases, digital downloads, and merchandise supervised by Funimation will help creators in Japan more directly than having a finished title licensed as is would. And while it's been only a handful of titles in the past, there's a future where Funimation and companies like it are on the production committees of more and more shows. The more involved they get in helping these shows resonate around the world, the stronger these relationships grow, and the more people get to experience the brilliance of anime. That's the future we're here for. Anyone catch that misrepresentation of the business model?
And I also saw another interesting thing that my eyes kind of locked in on, which was, in all honesty, help creators.
Ah, yes.
Yeah,
that's the misrepresentation of the business model. This subscription to Funimation, purchases of home video will help creators. What do we mean by creators is the question. Because when people hear creators, what they're usually thinking of are the studios and the animators down in the trenches making the stuff. But we've studied the business.
I'm wagging
model.
my finger right now.
We're a little smarter than that, Funimation. We know that by and large, unless the studio is sitting on the production committee, they've been paid, and they can't necessarily expect for the continued success of the show to reflect on them monetarily. They can't necessarily expect a return based on that, unless they're also sitting on the production committee. which a
Who
lot of studios do
conveniently
now.
they are on these shows.
Well, a lot of studios do now, but not all of them. And not everyone knows that. So it's really easy to say, we're helping the creators.
We're
But are we
helping.
really?
So, yeah, that sort of dovetails nicely into kind of the meat of what we're going to be talking about here, which is sort of the Western encroaching influence on anime, manga, video games, and so forth.
Yes.
Basically, that whole nerd sphere.
Mm.
So,
I mean,
if we look into the history of anime, this is something I've looked into. This is something important, and I actually have a couple articles on Ayashike about this. If we look into the history of anime, we have a collection of people who were deep into the tape trading culture and sending tapes back and forth, trading our Battlestar Galactica for their space battleship Yamato and whatnot.
And so forth.
And a lot of these people were centralized around a few population hubs.
Mm-hmm.
And this correlated to the locations of the biggest anime clubs at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens if you aren't in one of those population hubs and you still want to get anime is you have to go to a sci-fi convention. And there you might find people selling some of these bootleg anime tapes.
Which we should sort of point out that, yeah, before there weren't anime conventions. You actually had to go to related things.
Oh yeah,
I remember.
And
I
a lot of anime fandom, both in the West and in Japan, grew out of sci-fi.
This is why it was marketed so heavily for that crowd to begin with.
Correct.
I mean, that's why you saw it on Sci-Fi Network.
Yep.
You saw it being kind of marketed around like Trekkies and things like that. Which, by the way, for those of you who are Dirty Pair fans, there's a fun little Trekkie connection there if you want to dig it out.
So you go to these sci-fi conventions and you encounter the guy selling tapes, and the problem with that was a practice that was frowned upon by the big anime clubs back in the day. Now, fast forward to the early 1980s, and you have a few small companies in the United States that were basically the first anime licensing firms, except what they did was, generally speaking, they would license an anime, edit it heavily, and then rebrand and remarket it in the US as a children's cartoon.
Like Voltron would be a great example.
Voltron's an example, but we're talking more egregious than that. We're talking switching around basically the entire point of the show to make it something completely different.
Right. Basically, doing some serious chopping and mangling.
Yep.
Like to the point where it's unrecognizable.
A lot of this culminated in Studio Ghibli sending one of these firms a samurai sword with a note saying no cuts.
No cuts.
Yeah, Warriors of the Wind.
Yep.
Gotta love. There's a part of me that smells about that story.
I can appreciate it.
I love the cover because it's so, it's like kind of those things are there, but it's like drawn so differently than what's actually in the movie.
No. I just like the fact that they actually sent the sword.
Yeah, well that too. But I'm talking about like the cover for Warriors. You'll see. I'm gonna get it for you.
But my point with telling this whole story is that it's not a coincidence that the first anime licensing firms were not at all invested in the medium and had no appreciation for it, to the point where they saw they saw these anime movies and said, we can chop this up, completely rearrange it, and rebrand it and remarket it and make money off of it.
You know, it
And
almost
the connection right there is that the people who were most appreciative of anime at the time collectively frowned on the practice of selling it. When what they should have done was they should have realized that someone was going to sell anime tapes eventually, and there's no reason it can't be them.
Okay, get ready. Get ready. I'm posting this.
So,
in the...
it's important to understand that that's what we're working from when we go back to the present and talk about the degrees to which we're seeing Western influence going on in anime, because this paradigm never left.
No,
there is
to this day you're still seeing that shit.
Make no mistake, there are certainly licensing firms out here who have a very deep appreciation for the medium and have a lot of respect for it, but the genesis of that entire industry was based on having no respect for the medium and having no desire to keep it to keep it as close to 1-to-1 with the original as possible.
No, they basically operated a artistic chop shop of sorts.
Yes.
And they basically very haphazardly would create these Frankenstein's monsters and set them loose on unsuspecting, society.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Also,
to be fair, there are some
note the running
instances
time on the tape, by the way.
there are some instances where doing that kind of thing to an anime was necessary to get that anime over here. And I'm talking specifically about Macross and Robotech.
Carl Macek and his whole...
Carl Macek's goal was to get Macross over here. He
Right,
had no interest in...
We should actually point out that he wasn't really happy that had to happen that way.
Exactly. If Carl Macek had Carl Macek's way, it would have been just Macross. But because of the way American TV worked, he had to pad it out. So we ended up with Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross and Genesis Climber Mospeada kind of spliced in there to make what we now know as Robotech. Which,
and again,
the saddest part
Voltron
is, if you
would suffer a similar thing.
Voltron suffered a similar thing. The saddest part is, if the people behind those works had waited a few years, it probably would have been fine.
Yep.
We probably would have actually gotten Beast King Go Lion. We probably would have actually gotten Super Dimension Fortress Macross, and we probably would have gotten all those other works too. But
actually not the TV series, and I'll tell you why. Because those are TV series, and it was when the OVA market was brought here. That's when it became, because back then they didn't put TV series on tape like that.
What I'm saying is we eventually, like, it. True or false? If Carl Macek had waited, and if we didn't get the whole thing with Robotech and Harmony Gold, if someone else had licensed SDF Macross at that point in time, would we or would we not have a Western Blu-ray Macross release? Right now.
Maybe. Yeah.
We would.
Maybe.
Of course we would. Of course we would. We got a Western Mazinger Z release. Like, all of it. So of course we'd get Macross. We'd probably...
Yeah, the paradigm was so different because...
And that's what I'm talking about, though.
You had to have... in order to be on TV...
That VZ is exactly what I'm talking about. That's the point I just made, is... There are some instances where it was necessary, specifically with stuff like Macross, where to get it on Western TV, they had to have a certain number of episodes, so they had to splice in.
Yeah, but you got the time frame of that mid 80s point was you had to have the show in tandem with the toys. And actually, very few anime at that. See, this is my expertise. This area, there were very few, and actually, believe it or not, very few anime had that tandem of being on TV and having the toys available at the same time. Because there were some anime that was brought out, but the toys weren't. Vice versa, there were a lot of these robot toys that were on the shelves at the time, but no anime. You know,
we're getting off the point though. The point I'm making is the early '80s paradigm of bringing over shows, slicing them up, not even in a Robotech way, but more egregiously than that, and rebranding them or remarketing them.
The Matron one way, where it's two shows back and forth, and we're just talking to each other in a screen.
Yeah, but rebranding them, remarketing them as something completely different. What that started, this is my hypothesis, that started because the people selling tapes, the people who had a business mind for this whole thing, weren't the same people who were big in tape trading, weren't the same people who were in these big anime clubs and distributed this stuff for free. And coming off of that, my hypothesis is that paradigm tumbled all the way down to the present day, where it's clear that some of these people in the anime industry don't really have an appreciation for anime as it exists.
No, that's why they allow people to do all this stupid shit. Because who cares? It's just some terrible fan service show, right?
Well, here's the thing. So here's where it starts to get dangerous. We're at a point where 46% of the anime industry's revenue is coming from overseas, and America is a fraction of that, sure, but there's no doubt in my mind that it's a significant fraction. And the trend is that percentage is going to rise. And there certainly is a desire from the Japanese side to repatriate some of that market share, because the greater proportion of industry revenue comes from overseas means that less is making it into the hands of the studios. And that's something that the industry is concerned about, and rightfully so, because if these studios start shutting down, then the industry is not going to be able to make quite as much anime. Or worse, they're going to put all that extra work on the remaining studios. And that's just going to be worse for everyone. Because not only have a whole bunch of people lost jobs because a whole bunch of studios shut down,
then you'll have other people trying to basically pick up the slack.
Bingo.
And it'll cause even more ridiculous deadlines and awful work conditions.
Right, exactly. So, and that's why I think it's kind of dangerous when there's some people, and this from like a month ago, this one tweet was going around from a person who subsequently got hired by Viz Media as a digital marketing production assistant, talking about let me actually read this whole thing. So this coming from February 18th. Imagine being so much of a weeb that you can't see past your own rose-colored glasses and think that Japan is some sort of anime amusement park that you ignore actual Japanese LGBTQ plus people fighting for equal rights and taking homophobia and transphobia to task in their content. I don't even remember what the context of this is, by the way. Not being homophobic, transphobic, or misogynistic is not some Western SJW thing that just popped out of nowhere. You truly hate to see it. Regardless of that, with the US being one of the biggest markets for anime and manga, there is going to be a conversation between stakeholders in Japan and here when it comes to creating content that appeals to Western audiences. The anime industry is a business. And the response I gave to that was 46% of anime industry revenue comes from overseas. That's everywhere that isn't Japan. America is only a part of that. Also, the industry is very interested in repatriating some of that market share. They don't want to just make anime for other countries. Also, the more the industry's revenue comes from overseas, the less of that is actually making it into the hands of the studios and animators making the anime. So if we want to support the creators, we might want to be careful bragging about our market share. But here's where it starts getting dangerous. We have people working in levels of the Western anime licensing and publication and production infrastructure who seem to believe that there's a necessity for their input into the Japanese side of the production.
And like most things, it is usually political in nature.
And for some reason, it has to be political. So, here's an article I found a while back. It's coming from this is a magazine. I believe they kind of discontinued it. I don't believe this magazine is in print anymore. But it's a Japanese magazine that they put out one English language issue of, and that issue was talking particularly about the cause and effects and paradigms of the Japanese anime industry's overseas reach.
Right. This looks like sort of how they're going to farm it out to other East Asian countries.
Yes, exactly. So this is back during a year when China, Korea, and Taiwan actually surpassed the United States in the number of animation contracts going out to the Japanese anime industry. And this is an article talking about the concerns with that. So going down to the third heading here, will Japan become China's anime making factory within 5 years? However, we must not be rash and bask in the blind happiness of sales being at a record high. The first point we should worry about is this one. The number of works being produced in Japan on consignment by Chinese digital broadcasters has increased. To put the above in perspective, the style of overseas sales no longer simply means a Japanese production partnership funded the creation of said piece or work, which it owns the intellectual property of, and sold the digital and physical broadcasting rights to an overseas distributor. The reason for this being that works produced in Japan on consignment by foreign distributors, meaning the distributor pays for the creation of a product for itself in a Japanese studio, are included in what is counted as overseas. So what they're saying is, this isn't all just licensing, but this is stuff like episodes of the Batman animated series that were produced in Japan, but funded 100% by by an American studio. They're talking about this in China.
Yeah, and you saw a lot of this in the late 80s and early 90s too, with cartoons in general.
Right.
Yes.
Like there's some episodes of like Captain Planet that were obviously done over there.
Right. So when we talk about that 46%, some of that is Japanese studios doing animation work for overseas companies, not necessarily involved in the production committee business model.
Right. And as an aside here, and sort of kind of filtering in all this, it says even here that said distributors include Tencent, which is a big Chinese media giant, and of course Netflix and Amazon.
Yes.
Which everybody knows about Netflix. I mean, there's some Netflix originals that have been, like Devilman Crybaby and so forth. And I mean, you will see...
Violet Evergarden premiered on Netflix here.
Yeah.
Yes, that reminds me, I need to look something up about that. Carry on.
But yeah, and you'll probably see more of that. But I understand what you're saying. This is what's interesting about the way numbers are being counted, because interestingly enough, oh wow, something just went off. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted. Another thing that strikes me as interesting is sort of to make it relevant to something that's going on right now. I see a lot of stuff in publication in the news and whatnot talking about the coronavirus, but the thing is there are a lot of those, and people don't realize that just using that term doesn't necessarily mean they're referring to the one they're talking about right now.
Or,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they kind of fixed that because now everyone's calling it COVID-19, coronavirus disease 2019.
Right. And I understand that, but the point is there were clickbait factories rolling out all these stories, and what they were saying wasn't false, but because of the way it's worded, you see what I'm saying? And this is very similar, and with numbers, they're including certain things that some people might not actually include in some of these numbers, or vice versa, for that matter.
Right.
And that's just, I mean, normally in statistics we call things like that skewing. One way or another. When you're trying to make something look bigger or smaller than it is. Yeah, and even here, I'm seeing even more. Here it is, even, Devilman Crybaby, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, but going down a few paragraphs from what we were just reading, this type of production is, of course, one way to survive in the global market. However, since works are being produced on consignment, a business won't be able to continue operating independently forever. The day will suddenly come where a company overseas withdraws its orders on a decision from its home country, along the reasoning that it'll be more cost-effective to send our orders to China. In a way, the overseas companies will hold the life or death of domestic partners in their hands. So what they're saying is, if it's all well and good to make money producing shows for these other companies, these other countries, but the moment those countries decide to repatriate those operations into their own nation, you're going to be left high and dry if you rely on that form of income.
Well, sure, because then you have to play ball on their terms, basically, and that would, especially something that's, I don't want to say nationalistic, but that's generally considered to be sort of what's the right word I'm looking for here? Contained within its own country, I guess.
Domestic?
Most domestic, yeah, thank you. For some reason, I could not think of that. Yeah, I mean, most of it's money and all that, and again, language barrier and all that. most of it does come from, its domestic sales and fans and whatnot. And that would probably present a problem on some level.
Well, originally the co-productions with Japan, not even co-productions, like the stuff you were talking about, outsourcing animation to Japan was just because that was cheaper than American animation.
Bingo.
Oh, I know.
But
they're saying the same thing for China as they're trying to get at.
Yeah, but the weird thing is the talent pool in Japan was so much better that at the time, like, especially anything done by Tokyo Movie Shinzo, like, you could tell which episodes worked on the Batman the Animated Series or Animaniacs. And my assessment is, like, they do Western animation better than the Western animation companies could. Because there were some that were domestic, too. But, again, it was like you saw the skill set difference. Which is why they were kind of reserved for, like, either the intros or the most important episodes.
Right.
So they knew what they had. They knew what they had at that time. It was like...
Well, they knew that there was talent there, and this is one thing that, like, so I can't blame companies like Funimation and Netflix and Crunchyroll for wanting to get involved in the anime space, because it's big, it's growing, and it's really good, and it's given us a lot of stuff that we don't see anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. It's a I don't want to say they've cornered that market, but they found a thing that no one else is offering. Basically, it's
they found a thing that no one else is offering, and part of my issue is nobody really seems to acknowledge what exactly it is they're offering that no one else is offering. Because you get all the every few months I've seen that, like every half year or every few months I see this. Well, what is anime really? And it's always one of these YouTubers like, what is anime really?
Let's trying to basically include stuff that they just personally like, and they or some in some grand sort of design they've got in their head, we got to include this and that.
Well, part of it is I like anime, so everything I like must be anime, and anime must be everything I like. But another big part of it is people really don't seem to understand why anime has the appeal it does. So they talk about all this stuff. Oh, okay, well, maybe Avatar: The Last Airbender is anime. Maybe
Legend of Korra is anime.
Legend of Korra is anime. Maybe Boondocks is anime. And
sometimes you just want to smack them.
Well, it's like, what is it about the... So, okay.
Other things do not have these fucking questions like this.
Well, here's the thing. Did anyone ever make up a specific word to talk about Code Lyoko? Because that's French. That's from another country.
Mm-hmm. Well,
we talk about anime like it's some kind of like some weird subset of animation that we just haven't nailed down why it's so different, but we just know it's different. So anything that imitates its style, sure, let's include it in that. But we have nailed it down, just nobody wants to admit it. Because admit here's the answer. Y'all ready for this? I'm about to answer all your questions.
Y'all ready for this? Sorry.
The reason we made up a specific word for Japanese animation is because the fact that it's Japanese plays a role in its appeal. You can't sit there with a straight face and tell me that Americans, even with all our gun culture, would have come up with something like Opate.
Oh, no.
It's not going to happen. There are particular parts of the Japanese culture that are conducive to creations like Opate.
Strike witches. Yeah.
Creations like Strike Witches. Creations like C3 Boo.
Laid Back Camp, a show about girls and their camping.
And that's the whole thing. It's like
Night Shift Nurses.
yeah, they're
actually that one. See, just from some, from some gross shit. Like, come on, you could almost see like Larry Flint doing something fucked up like that.
But there are cultural influences, and the reason nobody talks about this is because if we were to admit that, then it would soon be very apparent that a lot of the people who are judging anime based on highly westernized paradigms are being remarkably unfair to the medium.
Oh, sure. No argument there. But you're forgetting, anime is... remember those at the beginning of all those fucking New Type USA deals?
Yeah. I love, like, or again, a lot of the old trailers for, like, tapes at that time, where it was like, especially the UK ones. And it was
the ones that made it sound like it was some sort of futuristic thing.
Yes,
like cutting edge, even stuff that's fucking like 8 years old.
Yeah. It's like cutting edge, high tech animation. You know, it's like, and
it's just like,
no, okay. it's like, dude, anime, especially then, was the most analog produced medium at the you know. Unless you're talking about the Golgo 13 movie that had, you know, the
well, the thing is they were looking for an angle.
I know.
And that angle was like, oh, we'll sell it to dumb people who don't know any better. That this, it's like some sort of like, it's from Japan and they're like
the future.
Yeah, they're far ahead in the time zone.
Right.
You know, so they're in the future. Woo!
People really thought that.
But the thing that's weird about that is it proves that the Weird Japan thing was even there then.
Oh God, yeah, certainly. I would give anything, because I heard that this exists, but I never saw it. That Current Affair did an expose on Ursugadoji. And it's like, you could almost imagine like how they would present it.
The
demon rape cartoons from Japan. Are your children watching? You know.
Yeah, instead of like, it's 10 o'clock, where do you know where your children are? It's 10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock. Is your teenage daughter being pounded by a cephalopod?
And you know, and of course there's animation called Japanimation. Nobody.
Well, yeah, that. Yeah, I can hear that in my head, like some sort of like, you can almost hear someone like Bill O'Reilly saying that shit.
And that would make it seem like the entire medium was that.
Oh yeah, well yeah, because that's the old model version of what clickbait was, really.
It really was. It was.
It was misleading the public on things for ratings.
Right.
Anyway, Anubis had something to say.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have that going on, where people don't seem to want to admit that the fact that it's culturally Japanese, the fact that it's different culturally than what we get over here is part of the appeal of anime. And a lot of people who think that way are in high levels, both in the journalistic sphere and in the industry sphere over here. And that gets to part of the problem. And we're at a point where it's starting to become concerning. And even the Japanese industry is looking at this like, I don't know if having so much market share overseas is sustainable.
Or even worth it, because they're starting to see a lot of these idiots screeching, yelling about dumb shit. Like artists and stuff being basically hounded on fucking social media and whatnot.
Well, yeah, and
there's got to be a level of what in the fuck is wrong with these people.
And it gets to a point where I've seen talk of this paradigm in the past few months of because the media is so global, and this was talking specifically about Japanese video games, which is an industry that, if I'm not mistaken, relies even more so on Western sales to put money in their pockets.
Mm-hmm.
So people were talking about the idea of having localizers on the staff of the game's development house in Japan, because because overseas sales are such an important aspect of those games' revenue stream.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the point we're at. Is it a good idea to have Western localizers on staff for these games? And
considering the way they're behaving when they're over here, fucking no.
Considering the way they're behaving over here, and especially considering what we talked about before the break, with a lot of these companies fundamentally putting out products that people don't want to buy because they're creating alternative censored, localized versions of these products.
Mm-hmm. To me, it's very, very weird that it feels like we're coming full circle and going back to how it was beforehand.
We're going back in some ways. We're going back to the paradigm of the early 80s where
you can't handle the real shit. It has to be edited.
Yeah, in the West, you would get the Western version of that product. And because of the way licensing works, there's no chance of getting a proper Western release of it.
Unless you circumvent it and actually import it.
Yeah, and even then...
And that's based upon the fact that it doesn't have subtitles or that you even understand it.
Yeah,
you know,
I hope you understand Japanese because
because at that point you're kind of left up shit creek without a paddle.
Yeah.
But the point is like we were talking about earlier. Say you interested in seeing Pokemon in its original form. I mean, like if you want to see it dubbed like that, you're not gonna.
Yeah. Can't do it.
It's not going to happen. And the reason you won't is because the way it was marketed here took off, and obviously they're not going to go back and change that now. I mean, even if, you know. So you're really not really given a whole lot of options.
And a lot of people like to shit on dub people, but they deserve to watch the same anime we do.
So
like I'm sorry for the people who really like to shit on dub people, but if someone wants to watch Ghost Stories but not have the Stephen Foster gang shit all over it, they deserve that.
They're not gonna get it, but
they're not gonna get it because of the decisions made by the Stephen Foster gang. And we can talk about this. I put out an episode of Otakunomics where it turns out that the narrative surrounding ghost stories may have very well been a complete fabrication of ADV staff to excuse the fact that they turned that dub into a complete joke. And they did it because they were convinced that if they had just dubbed the show as is and did it regularly, they wouldn't have sold as much of it.
Mm-hmm.
Which may be true, certainly. Ghost story, like, just how many people are gonna go wild for a show that's basically a children's show about Japanese mythology.
Right.
Not necessarily a top seller, not necessarily a Sword Art Online, but
the real issue is the false pretenses in which they sold their version of it.
Bingo. Because like they knew they had to spin a narrative around it, because otherwise what happened was Stephen Foster and the gang just decided to fuck this anime up on their own whim. And nobody said no to them.
I don't know.
But but now we're at a point where we have Crunchyroll and Rooster Teeth and Netflix. Netflix is kind of a secondary on this level because they're in the anime space because they know anime makes money. They don't really actually give a fuck about anime. Like Netflix isn't out to like shift around the paradigms going on in the Japanese industry.
No, they're pouncing upon, hey, this is making money.
Exactly.
I mean, it's anybody with a brain sees that.
Now, it leads to some egregious stuff, like them taking out all of the product placement in Tiger and Bunny, but it's not...
Or ruining the ending of Evangelion TV.
Or not having Fly Me to the Moon in Evangelion, but it's not at a culture building level.
That's purely a business related thing.
Exactly.
It's not malicious in the sense that, let's try to purge the Japaneseness of it. Which again is almost like coming full circle, because like if you go back to a lot of those old Sailor Moon and whatnot, that's kind of what they did with those. Like when they brought them over here, like to the point where they were removing kanji and things like that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, obviously we're not operating on that level, but the point is they're trying to purge elements of it that they don't think we can either handle or they just don't like.
Yeah, so we're at a point where we have Crunchyroll and Funimation sitting on production committees, which means they have some level of decision-making power. We read an article a while back about how Crunchyroll was directly responsible for the English title of this anime being Recovery of an MMO Junkie. Otherwise it was something completely like that's not a direct translation of the Japanese. But
yeah,
Crunchyroll, being on the production committee, determined that outcome because it would be easier to market that in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes a dangerous paradigm, because now we have these companies that have a history of not just censorship, not just changing around things, but trying to build a culture around anime in the United States that is very particular to their own, especially political views.
Right.
And they have decision-making power. Now, what's weird to me about this is that Crunchyroll, to their credit, doesn't seem to doesn't seem to bring those political stances into what they decide, what anime they decide to sit on the production committee of. And they evidently don't bring that decision into like the production committee level, because they were on the production committee for they otherwise Shield Hero wouldn't be on the production committee for that, and they wouldn't be on the production committee of MMO Junkie because they had that whole 15-second controversy about the director of that liking some alt-right tweets.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it kind of odd that nobody seems to hold Crunchyroll's feet to the fire when
for that
when not just for that, but like you said, when talking about Shield Hero.
Well, right.
They not only did
like people bitch so much about them showing that.
Well, people bitched about Shield Hero, but the bitching at Crunchyroll was for like 5 seconds. Nobody held, which is especially egregious when you consider, hey, if you think Shield Hero shouldn't exist, you better not be subscribed to Crunchyroll, because they used your subscription money to fund that show.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're out here, if you don't want evil cartoons to exist, you need to divest from Crunchyroll, because they're willing to use your show to fund evil cartoons.
I'm doing a thing where I'm rubbing my palms together.
Well, I mean, we joke, but I'm serious about that. Listen, just like I'm not giving my money to Funimation because I know they're willing to fuck up an anime based on their own whims, don't give your money to Crunchyroll if you know they're willing to use your subscription money to fund evil cartoons. I'm serious about this.
Evil.
By the way,
if you don't think Shield Hero should exist, then you better cancel your subscription real soon before they fund another evil cartoon with your money. I'm serious about that.
Guys, last week did you see that thing that they had Crunchyroll originals?
Yeah, so here's another thing, and we're talking
including
about
the most infamous one.
We're talking about the giving money to these companies, and they're supposedly supporting the anime industry, but Crunchyroll's also creating their own original media. And this goes back to my prediction, give it 5 to 7 years. I don't think Crunchyroll is going to exist as an independent entity, and I think it's going to just be rolled into Verve. It'll exist as a brand. All Verve's anime content that's not on High Dive will be under the Crunchyroll brand. But because they're both under the same parent company, there's really no real reason to keep them both around as separate entities. I think at some point you're going to see that, okay, we're just rolling the Crunchyroll subscription around into the Verve subscription. And if you want to subscribe to Crunchyroll, you're subscribed to Verve.
Mm-hmm. Understand.
And then that gets even deeper into it, because okay, if I'm correct, and we're rolling Crunchyroll into this greater nerd culture media company, then is that company going to be sitting on the production committees that Crunchyroll is sitting on? So it becomes an interesting question, because we have, I mean, in a way, if you roll down that paradigm, that is potentially more dangerous than even Funimation sitting on production committees, because at least Funimation has a relationship with an anime company. Mm-hmm. They're under the same parent company as Aniplex is, and they have a close relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Verve has no real investment in anime besides what they've built of the anime culture themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And besides Funimation, besides Crunchyroll as a brand. Because make no mistake, Crunchyroll is a brand where
Well, sure.
it's not just a licensing firm or a streaming service. It's a brand. They've got their own convention. They've got their own farce of an award show. They've got their own.
You see them powered by and things like that.
They're out here. They're sponsoring a whole lot of conventions. They put on a big show every convention.
They rig their own award systems.
It's a brand, and they're. I might say at least equally, perhaps more so. Their goal is building culture, not serving products.
No, exactly.
It's basically a long form marketing play, and they certainly make money off of it. They certainly sell subscriptions doing that. But hey, you look at this Crunchyroll Originals thing. Guarantee you that's been in the works for years.
Mm-hmm.
Guarantee you they had plans of coming out with their own original programming for many years and weren't talking about it, but were building their brand presence. Because that simply would make sense given the amount of brand building they're doing. Funimation's also doing a lot of brand building as well, but they seem to be more unilaterally anime focused. They don't seem to be particularly interested in putting out their own cartoons.
But that being said, the nepotism is off the chart. I mean,
there seems to be a very insular community of people working for a lot of these companies,
and like if you look at an intersection of where these people are, you will notice something that's very common, and that's highly political causes involved.
And that's something that's particularly dangerous.
Because
here's the thing, and this is something. One of these things that I anticipate explaining a lot, because I try and speak carefully, but people don't always try and listen carefully. Understood that plenty of anime is political in nature. Fully understood.
That's not what we're talking about.
100%. I welcome it. I love Ghost in the Shell. It's fantastic. Love all the shit. But when you try to impose it at a subculture level is where it starts to be a problem. When I say otaku have no political allies, this is at a subculture level. When I talk about when people talk about politics in anime, quote unquote, they're talking about a subculture level. They're talking about when you have Lily in Zombieland Saga. We could have a conversation about that, but you have a lot of people trying to enforce a particular political view of that part of that show on a subcultural level.
Is that the one with the green hair that turned out to be?
That's the one. That's the small one that turned out to be trans. So, when we talk about politics in anime, the number of people, it comes down to this: are we having a discussion about the media, or is someone trying to impose a particular brand of power structure upon the subculture? And where it gets dangerous is when these people have the ears of production committees, Or I go one further. It gets dangerous when people have the ears of people who have the ears of production committees. And it gets especially dangerous when you can't hear any opposing viewpoint from a similar point of status in the industry or in the subculture. Once again, I asked this last episode, name me one prominent figure working for a anime distribution company or a journalistic outlet covering anime, and known ones, not any of this bounding into comics or one angry gamer shit. Name me one of these people who is outspokenly right wing. Go. Oh wait.
Yeah, I mean, have fun with that.
You can't find them. You can't find them because
I just saw a tumbleweed go by.
Either they're not out here, or, and possibly worse, they are out there, but they don't want to speak up. They don't want to speak up politically because they know what would happen to them.
I think it's that they're all. Oh, go ahead. No, I was wrong. Forget it. Because I was gonna say, there's places like message boards and shit, but those aren't people putting publication. Those are just fans.
These aren't the
that's
journalists.
not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Those aren't the journalists, and those especially aren't the people working at these these companies.
So, I mean, to give an example of what I mean with this whole big nepotism, ancestral angle going on, there are a remarkably close ties between people that work at AniFem and Funimation and Crunchyroll.
Right.
Like that triangle.
Also, Anime News Network.
Well, yeah, and Anime News Network as well, ANN. There's actually at one point I had this weird little flow chart thing going on, but I lost it. It's really interesting though. You can definitely dig around and spot some kind of weird shit. And when I say highly political, I don't mean I'm talking about rabid, not like your uncle's highly political. I'm talking fanatical.
Well, it's not like, oh, they vote and they have
viewpoints
views.
I don't agree with.
Yeah.
No. We're talking screaming at the top of their lungs, yelling, having panic attacks that Trump won kind of shit.
Yeah. And the issue
think they're
is,
about to be put into a cage or some shit.
Well, the issue is when it starts to become apparent that is bleeding into their career.
Oh yeah, and this is not just a loose connection. I mean, there are voice actors and actresses that are just as bad.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can just go on their timeline, see that they're not even talking about anime most of the time. They're just yelling about, one thing or another. And I mean, not that I pay attention too much to it, but if I did, one thing I wouldn't for long because it would get annoying. I mean, because let's be real here. You don't go to these people to see what they're up to in that capacity. You want to learn, you want to hear about anime and anime stuff. You don't give a fuck if they have this opinion on birth control or whatever. At least I don't know anybody that.
Well, on some level, it's polarizing.
Oh yeah.
It's I really like this voice actor's performance in this anime. It really inspired me. Blah 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 blah. And then you go like you go check them out on Twitter to say, hey, maybe I can follow this person and get some of their thoughts and their insights. And it turns out they're the kind of person who hates the kind of person you are because you have some political beliefs that disagree with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it especially gets egregious when we get stuff like we mentioned before the break with prison school and whatnot, when you're trying to be concerned and they're clapping back at you because because they made a decision based on their politics and they decided, yeah, okay, well, if you complain about this, then you must be my enemy.
And
that's what it really, that's one thing that one major paradigm I'm talking about when I say otaku have no political allies is subcultures are supposed to unite us, and we have a bunch of people in the subculture who it appears their primary mode of identification is something as divisive as politics.
Well, not only that, but they don't see themselves in the sphere as fan of XYZ. They see themselves as these other things and also XYZ. And you have to be on board with XYZ to be in said subculture in the same space as them.
Oh, yeah. It's when I talk about gatekeeping, there's two types of gatekeeping. There's gatekeeping to preserve the core aspects of the subculture. And then there's gatekeeping to expel all aspects of the subculture that aren't basically exactly what you are.
And there's a lot of that. A lot of it goes with the identity politics, of course. You see a lot of that. I identify with, these various causes or whatever. And these are highly important to said individual. And they want to make sure they're important to other people in the space that probably don't give a shit.
Well, it's like, my whole thing is,
because that's irrelevant and for something else completely
it's fucking
outside
irrelevant.
of it.
It's fucking irrelevant. I see white people all the time on Twitter talking about, oh man, well it's really hard for all these people of color in the anime fandom. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, really? I step up in the video game store and they don't dispatch a defensive lineman to block me from the anime shelf. Like it's not hard to be involved in this market and in this subculture. It's really not hard.
So no sign that says whites only for anime.
Yeah, no, I need to go over to the colored section of the video store. But
yeah,
it's
like and it's ran by people that all look like Biden and Sanders.
But here's the thing, and here's what they're talking about when they talk about how hard it is for people of color in the subculture. A lot of what we're talking about when we're talking about that is, if you're a black cosplayer, there's less of a chance you're going to be invited as a guest to an anime convention. So it's 100% based on clout and monetary gain.
Mm-hmm.
It's not based on appreciation of the medium. It's not based on being a fan. It's not based on participating in the subculture. It's based on, I want to have myself out there. I want to have status. I want to have status without having to gain it subculturally. I want to have status based on something that like, I don't want to come up with my own way to gain status. I want to gain status the same way other people have.
Gotcha.
So when what it comes down to, and why it's so dangerous for these thought patterns to be close to the Japanese side of things, is it creates a false narrative around what the Western side wants. And this is something we've been saying for a long time.
Well, there's a major disconnect between actual fans of this stuff and basically our media.
Exactly. And the reason,
I mean, that's true of video games too, in general.
And here's the thing: is we can talk about how, regardless of that, we're the people out here buying the stuff, so we're gonna win out in the end. But that's not necessarily true, because there's another element of it, and that's who's dominating the conversation. And sure, we'll win out in the end, but it'll be a Pyrrhic victory. And this is why. Because here, scenario, we have a bunch of people who don't represent the community. They don't represent the subculture at large, but they have the ears of the Japanese side of things, and they're trying to convince them that what they want is what the rest of the subculture wants, which isn't true.
Right. Yeah.
So if you play that out, the Japanese side of things starts making more stuff to appeal to what they were told the Western fan base wants. People over in Japan don't buy it because it wasn't made for them. People over here won't buy it because it wasn't made for us. It was made for a bunch of people.
Sort of a phantom demographic in a way.
It was made for a clique who are trying to make the subculture into something it isn't.
Gotta make this thing acceptable.
And they're gonna keep trying that, and it's gonna keep failing, and maybe studios will go under. Maybe people will lose jobs. It'll cause turmoil in the market, and they'll eventually get wise and start going back to making stuff that otaku want. But by then, the damage will have been done. And this is, and not to portray this as doom and gloom, there are people in the anime industry in Japan who recognize that the fans of anime over here and the fans of anime in Japan are basically the same kinds of people.
As noted by the fact that there are actually people making fun of these people.
Well, here's the thing: it's like
and their art, which is pretty entertaining.
Well, there was an interview on Anime News Network of all places that talked about. It was with I believe it was the president of Aniplex of America.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was talking about was, part of the interview was asking, is there a difficulty trying to market anime to different parts of the world that aren't Japan? And the answer, and this was a very interesting answer, and I'm trying to find the Yashike article I wrote on this because I don't want to misquote it. Here we go. So, talking about the global market of anime, talking about the question was, from a content standpoint, what do you think the prescription is? Do you think anime should just forge ahead doing what it's been doing, being anime as it is now? Or do you think it's going to change to meet the global audience? Do you think it needs to lose any of its cultural identity to be even more global? And the response was, an audience. Yeah, I think so. To the question of, do you think anime should just forge ahead doing what it's been doing? Because an audience is an audience. One Sword Art Online fan in Japan, one Sword Art Online fan in the US, same fan. And he goes on to say, in response to the next question of, but in terms of beating that global audience, you're going to be selling shows to Germans and whoever else in the world. Do you think Aniplex is going to start creating television that is aimed more at a global audience, so the content itself will be potentially more appealing to a even bigger global audience? Like now, do you need to consider what a German fan would want to see? And the response from Henry Gota was, I can probably defer to Hayao Miyazaki's words. To paraphrase, I am making the movie for a Japanese audience, but there are people all over the world with the same mentality as Japanese fans. So I think, like radio waves, some people get it. Even in Japan, everyone is not an anime fan, right? Anime fans react with the same radio wave. In the US audience, some people feel it too. So the Japanese industry is wise to this. They have an understanding that the Western audience is reacting to the same level of the same elements of appeal as the Japanese audience is. Now, what the question that needs to be asked is how many Western fans react to anime the same way Japanese fans do. And I'm willing to wager that it's a non-trivial proportion. That there's a significant number. I actually wager it's the majority of American fans that basically have the same sensibilities and mentalities as Japanese anime fans do. I'd be willing to wager that. Because you have to account for the silent majority. You have to account for the fact that a lot this stuff keeps getting licensed, keeps getting watched. And just in general, you've seen that there's a rich history of American anime critics and just Western in general, anime critics and people in those similar strata of the subculture having wild disconnects with what the rank and file anime fans believe. And like the paradigm has never not been true. At least not as far as I've been involved in the anime fandom.
Yeah, that's there's always been some level of that as far as I've been into it as well, because even in magazine stuff, when I'd be reading from back in the 90s and whatnot, I'd just see these weird opinion pieces and be like, what in the fuck are they on about?
Well, it's like you can name maybe two prominent anime critics who actually like ecchi anime.
Yeah, none of those. I mean, they would have less usually comments related to insulting the reader on some level.
But still, a lot of those anime end up being highly popular in the West.
Well, they're still licensing the High School DxD stuff.
Hey.
Still making it and still licensing it, and
Hey.
To Love Ru and whatnot.
Yep.
So there you go.
Here's the thing, and I think this can be our bottom line. There's definitely elements of influence going toward Japan that are that would be on some level destructive to the anime a lot of people like us like.
Or we could just say disruptive.
Disruptive is a better term. And that's why it's important. This is another thing we've been on for years. That's why it's important that people make it known that there's nothing wrong with the stuff that they like.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been really a big fan of that.
The anime guilt thing.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some things that you might think actually bad in the sense that they're not exactly well put together or whatnot, and you still like them anyway.
Certainly.
For one reason or another. I mean, just personal taste or whatever. And you can, kind of pin down that, yeah, I know it's not very good from a technical perspective or whatnot, but it has some sort of charm to it or whatnot. But the thing is like, oh, I feel bad that I like this thing. I mean, that's just so tiring.
I have to do the ironic thing.
It's tiring, and it's also destructive to the stuff they like. They don't stop liking the stuff. They don't just stop saying. They don't like. Someone's saying, "Oh, I'm otaku trash" because they watch Aramanga Sensei, but they didn't stop watching Aramanga Sensei.
So at the end of the day,
they're
going
to be mad if stuff like Aramanga Sensei is disrupted in a big way. So, and the rub of it is the fact that they have this internalized shame around it and don't want to talk about it.
That's because of the background radiation.
Yeah, it's the background radiation. And
because
what it ultimately means is that the people whose end game involves that stuff involves creating a chilling effect around that stuff to where
Scarlet Letter kind of stuff.
Yeah,
you want it to be untouchable.
Exactly. So
you want it to be basically sort of like the dirty thing swept under the rug. So much so that people don't even want to either.
Nobody wants to admit liking it because they become a subcultural pariah.
Basically, yeah. That's an interesting way to put it.
That just accelerates that paradigm when you impose that upon yourself by doing the anime guilt thing, which is why it's important, one, for people to cut that shit out, and two, it's important that there be not necessarily a journalistic outlet, but there need to be alternatives. There needs to be some kind of voice that's actually trying to speak to and be a voice for the rank and file anime fans. And on some level, that's what I'm trying to do with Iyashike.
Mm-hmm. I figured, and I assume your Otakunomics thing is just sort of a supplementary thing of that.
Otakunomics is arming people with knowledge. So, on some level, Otakunomics is arming people with knowledge so they're not taken advantage of by these kinds of people who have an interest in
less scrupulous types that are
have an interest in misrepresenting the truth in order to advance their business interests.
Mm-hmm.
Like a while back, I talked about how it's important to understand business models just in general, so you're not taken advantage of by people whose end game is not aligned with yours. But that's what I think is important, and what I think is important for combating this encroachment of very specific Western influences into the Japanese side of things. Is
And,
we need to
make
be
no
outspoken,
mistake.
and we need to support people who are trying to create an alternative outlet for like the actual fans, and not just this clique of people who
And
all share the same views.
And make no mistake, some of these people know exactly what they are very adamant about this. If you read the things they talk about, they systematically want to shatter this industry. And I mean, you can look at it. The people that say they could be lying, of course, but there are people like, say, I don't know, like Reset Era and places like that talk about how they're on the periphery of it or whatnot, and they want to change it from inside out, to remake it in basically their, progressive utopian kind of viewpoint or whatever.
That's never gonna happen in Japan.
No.
Yeah,
No, it's not.
And
But
here's the thing: it's never going to happen. But if they get
The
close to
point is they're
trying it,
trying.
it's going to cause turmoil, and that's not
Yeah,
that's
which
what
is
we
the
don't
real-
want.
exactly. So, yeah, I mean, just keep your eyes peeled. I mean, that's true.
Keep your eyes open. Keep on watch these companies closely, and especially the companies that do a lot of marketing, because it's a I don't know, it's just something to keep an eye on, to make sure that the subculture is being portrayed in a way that actually represents what the subculture is. And I don't think the biggest companies in this industry over here are doing that. I think that's the show.
Yeah.
No mail.
I am checking that right now. I'm pretty sure we don't have mail, but I'm going to look in the email box
Just to
just
make
to make sure.
I wish we had like some music from Sesame Street or something while you're doing that. Or like music from the Electric Company or some shit like that.
Yeah, we don't got mail. Though if you do want to send mail, the email address is ntrradio@gmail.com, and the website is ntrradio.net. VZ stuff is at vzmpa2moimekagatai.wordpress.com. He's got the Big Book of Idols at thebigbookofIdols.com, and he also does the shirts, which you can find at yashike.moe/store. Yashike.moe being where I create content relating to the otaku lifestyle. I've referenced several of my articles there on this episode. You can find that at yashike.moe. Shinikiba.moe is my company. I sell half-naked anime girl figures there. As a matter of fact, I added to the Yashike site pretty recently.
I wanted to whistle when you said that, but I couldn't do it.
Speaking of half-naked anime girl figures, because I don't want to sell the actual ecchi figures on eBay because they may have a problem with that, the actual ecchi figures I have can be found at yashike.moe/figures. I also have another company that I've been building in the background for the past 6 months. This is the 521 company. It's based off of the 521 rule of anime conventions.
Oh.
And I swear I didn't plan this, but the primary product we're selling is a small weekend travel kit for conventions that contains all TSA sized soap, deodorant, shampoo, toothpaste and hand sanitizer.
Yes, yes.
You can find that at 521rule.com as well as iyashike.moe/convention-supplies. You can just get to that via the store link. But yes, 521rule.com. That's my other company. It's 521 Company.
So if you're in a pinch, just remember 521 rule.
Yes, indeed.
Don't be like the Smash Brothers.
I was
community.
just about to say. If you think you're starting to smell like a Smash player, remember the 521 rule.
You should make that as a little tagline. Like if you think you're starting to smell like a Smash. That's great. I can just see them writing angry emails.
Hit up.
It's like make sure to take a shower before you write that email.
Otaku Midnight is coming back, so keep an eye out for them. The Bakugaijin Show is a really good podcast, as well as Asobi FM, so check all those out, because all those are really good. The Geeky Panda is a good friend of mine. I work with him very closely. He does stuff at thegeekypanda.net, so check his stuff out as well. I'm Tom Enforcer Anubis. At T Anubis on Twitter, at VZMK2, at Immortal_KGods, at NTR Radio. I'm Tom Enforcer Anubis.
I'm KGods.
I'm VZ Mark II.
And even though Corona-chan holds the globe in her hands, every time we say it, this is NTR Radio.